Hi, welcome to the video on present active participles. This is your first foray into verbs combined with another part of speech, like an adjective here. And so it's going to create kind of a new cool phrase that we can do. And before you have had verbs only as like things that make clauses complete or main sentences complete, but now we're going to start kind of experimenting with these things as as adjectives, as adjectival modifiers, and also they can make clauses that are also adjectival. So it's kind of a cool part of speech combination. And I guess with that, we will not waste any time. I'll try to keep this video pretty short. So make sure to rewind if you missed something, or make sure to pause it if you're writing things down. So participles are largely unknown to people for the most part, you probably use them more than you can identify them as participles. And so what we're going to do here first and foremost is just do some English participles. And so we can look at the examples here. The game inspired many youths training hard every day. So here you have just a normal subject, verb, and direct object. But this last part here is really what our focus is going to be on. We have the word training, which is actually a verb, but you'll note it's very non-finite. In other words, you can't just make a sentence out of this word training. You can't say the many youths training, period. That's not real. And so we're going to put an asterisk there because it's not a finite verb. What it is an adjective. It's a participle, actually. It's a participle, and it's an adjective as a verb or a verb as an adjective. And so the word training tells you what these youths were doing, and thus it modifies the youths. It tells you this concurrent action, okay? And so you'll note this one right here is in a clause, training hard every day, in a clause modifying the youths. Okay, and now we go down to the other sentence. The duckies swimming in the pond, quacking, captured the hearts of the many people nearby. A sentence inspired by my kids. So, the duckies, comma, swimming in the pool. Notice the ing. We saw this up here with the training. The ing is very important here. And you'll note that you can have a finite verb if you say like is verbing or are verbing, but you'll notice those verbs to be at the beginning there make it finite, whereas the ings by themselves with no verb to be, those are just participles, and that's kind of the key here, seeing those ings. So the duckies swimming in the pond. Again, that's not a complete sentence, but it does adjectively tell you something that these duckies are doing. And so you can see this as a whole clause, but see this, I inserted this one word just to make sure you could understand too. It doesn't have to have a whole clause with it. It can just be like one word, so just quacking, another participle. So you see the ing. And then if that's our subject, here's our verb, captured the hearts, direct object, of the many people nearby. And you'll note participles can go with any noun in the sentence. I very deliberately had training going with the direct object, and I very deliberately had swimming and quacking going with the subjects to show you that it doesn't matter what this noun head of the participle is doing in the sentence. You can still make it modify it. If we wanted to make something happen with the people, we can say of the many people, comma, passing by. And so you can do this with any noun. It's kind of cool. They're like adjectives. They can go with any noun. And I hope that helps you make sense of these things in English. You'll note that before we go on to the next slide that these are usually translated with an ing. The present active ones are at least. And there's no verb to be. So you don't say like is verbing or are verbing. You just say verbing. And lastly, you'll note that they're just basically adjectives. So they're adjectives kind of like reinvented and combined with a verb. So it's kind of cool. Let's do some in Latin now. We'll do forms first, and then we'll do some examples. All right. So when we create a Latin present active participle, I have our example here. Sedeo, sedere, sedui, seditus. We're going to be creating the participle forms here. But before we do that, there's of course, some theory. So we have to start with the root. Like every verb, we have to start with a root. And since these are present active, we're going to be using the present active root, which is from the second principal part. And so we're going to make sure that we're using that one. And we're just going to chop off the ERE and get said. So right over here, said. And then a vowel. Well, this is where you kind of use those EREs and AREs and IREs. The vowel before the NS or NT that's coming up in a second is either going to be an A or an E. You can't have anything else. No O, there's no U, there's no I. And it's really just, it's an A if this infinitive right here is an ARE. It's an E if it's literally anything else. So in this case, we're going to use an E because it's an ERE over here. All right, and then we see the NSNT. Okay, the NS is going to be for the nominative singular. NT is going to be for the rest of these things. But don't worry, you're thinking like, hey, the NT ending is just the third person plural present active ending. You just like they verb. Yes, but we're going to be adding on the third declension. So that's going to be cool. And I think that that'll make more sense when you see it on the other side here. So let's do that actually. Let me change color. We'll go to red. And the nominative is going to be sedens. And so we get, that nice root. We have a vowel, and then we have the NS ending for the nominative singular. The genitive is going to be sedentis. And you'll notice the third declension IS ending there. The dative ends up being sedenti. I zoomed in because my handwriting was getting really bad zoomed out. Sedentem. And of course, I'm assuming this is not neuter. If it's neuter, you're going to actually have sedens again. So I'll put a big N in parentheses for neuter. Okay. And that's just because of neuter rules. If you remember your neuter rules, that the nominative and accusative look the same. But most forms, masculine and feminine, all masculine and feminine forms are going to be sedentem. All right, sedente with an E. For the ablative, nominative plural, sedentes, sedentium. Notice the I too, in the IUM there, as I write the dative plural. The genitive plural has that nice IUM there. Okay, the dative is a sedentibus. Sedentes. Sedentibus. So very regular third declension endings. You see your blank ECMA, asimus, abus, ibus. You see, like I said before, your NS is your nominative singular. And after that, you get an NT and then a third declension ending. And so I can actually go through and show you each NT. NT in each and every one of these things right here. And then a third declension ending. So really what you're looking for in form, like if you're combing through a Latin sentence and you're wondering what's going on, if you see an NS or NT, be on alert. If the NT has a third declension ending after it, it's probably a participle. It doesn't always have to be one, by the way. There's NS, NT adjectives as well. And so you don't always need to have a participle with these things, but you check for that verb root. If you have a verb root, if you have an NSNT, third declension ending, you're good to go. You have a participle. And so let's do a couple examples just so we can do some translating. And then we'll wrap up the video. Okay, right away we see populum Romanum in viis clamantem juvare graci volebant. I kept the sentences kind of short so that we didn't have to focus on other things other than the participle. But just note that you can have participles in the middle of an indirect statement or anything else. So I'll be always on alert of everything going on. All right, so we have our accusative, which is a direct object. We see in vis, nice preposition, and then we see clamantem, and then we see clamo, clamares, that are a verb root. We see an nt, and we see a third declension em ending. So we're thinking participle for sure. I'm going to label it a PAP, present active participle. All right, so you'll see the commas here. I've done that very deliberately because this is a participial clause. And of course, we have to draw an arrow to the thing it modifies. So we see an EM here. We're thinking accusative singular. We see populum Romanum, also accusative singular. And so we're going to draw our arrow that way. The populum Romanum are going to be the ones doing that action. But you'll note that these participial clauses don't have a role in the main sentence. They're modification. And so the populum Romanum is still the direct object of the main sentence. We have to keep going, expecting a verb and a subject just the same. For juvare, we see an infinitive, and then we see subject and verb. And so we now have the Gracchi wanted to help the Roman people. Nothing unusual yet. And now this is where we put in our participle, because we attached our participle to the Roman people with that arrow. And so it's a good example of when to translate the participle. It's when you translate the noun, you usually tack on the participle right away. So you say the Gracchi wanted to help their own people, comma, shouting in the roads, period. All right. So what you see here is the participle clamantem translated just like in our first English slide with the ing. Because remember, that's the equivalent. That's the grammatical equivalent. And so that's what you do. And you'll note, just like I said before, there's no to be here. You're not saying the Roman people are shouting. You don't need that. It's a participle, so it's non-finite, which means you just put a comma and you say verbing. In this case, shouting. So the Gracchi wanted to help the Roman people, comma, shouting in the roads. All right, let's go to the next example. In Catilinam, nice prepositional phrase. Orationem, that's a nice accusative. Grave, I'm going with it. Cicero, yes, Cicero. He's a subject, he's a nominative, even though he has an O ending. And then we see agit, our verb. We already have a subject, verb, direct object. So we're going to keep going here. We have an accusative. Our comma hopefully is going to tell us that something new happened, because now we have too many accusatives. Verbis is an ablative or a dative, but I'm pretty sure it's ablative at this point, just given the fact that that's not a person and there's no giving or showing or telling verb. And then defendens, see the ns ending. Now, the ns ending, remember, it was nominative singular, which means that this whole phrase right here, from rem publicam defendens, goes with Cicero. All right. So what we do here is we analyze our accusatives really quick just to make sure we're good. This accusative seems like it's going in the participial clause. And so it's the direct object of just the participle, or as I like to call it, a doppel, D-O-P-P-L, a doppel, direct object of a participle. That is a phrase I made up, so you might not find that in your textbook. And anyway, so that's the direct object of just the participle. Gravem orationem up there earlier in the sentence, that one is the direct object of agit, the main verb. So we have to be very deliberate there when you have participles making clauses. We have to be aware that the accusatives could also be in those clauses instead of in the main sentence. If we have too many of the same thing, that could cause a problem. All right, so let's translate here to show what we've got. So we have Cicero, the subject, made, agit, a serious speech against Catiline. Now, I guess I didn't put the participle there yet on purpose, because I wanted to kind of ask you, like, where would you put it? I want you to think about that for a second. If I put it here, if I said Cicero made a serious speech against Catiline, comma, and then put the participle, you would think in English that it's going with Catiline. That would not be correct, because it's going with Cicero. We've already established the ns is nominative singular and goes with Cicero. And in English, word order matters a lot more. And so what I have to do is go back to where it says Cicero, make a comma, and then put our participle. All right. Now you see how, we see My goodness. Okay. I think that's close enough. So we see here how defending the republic with words, which is our participial clause, rem publicam verbis defendens. Notice how that kind of sticks with Cicero. And what I was saying when I was doing that is if I put it down here after Catiline, it would sound like Catiline's doing the defending of the republic. But in our Latin, remember, we have a nominative singular, therefore it agrees with Cicero, and therefore Cicero is the one defending. Okay, so Latin actually has a more logical system. It has this nice case and number and gender agreement, whereas English relies on word order. And so we have to make sure we can reflect that in English. We have to make sure our word order in English says what the Latin says. And so that's why you make that participle stick to what it modifies. And so, yes, I would say Cicero, comma, defending the republic with words, made a serious speech against Catiline, period. And guys, that is all I have for you. Make sure to rewind and check out more resources. Ask me any questions in office hours or on email. If you still have any issues with present active participles, you'll find a lot of these things in the Vulgate and in ecclesiastical texts. The early Christianity really liked to use present active participles, and so I think you'll find quite a few of them there. But also in classical texts that don't have to discount. There's lots of them in classical texts as well. These things are used pretty regularly by Latin people thousands of years ago. So I hope this helps, and I will see you in the next video.